no different than what we're seeing across the country. And then when you travel the district, or you hear from what's happening in certain areas, it's jobs and economy in different ways. So, if we're on the east side of the state, more of a focus into the ag sector than anything else. As you get into, the western part of the district, it's either tech or a lot of questions about what's happening with energy. So as we look to classroom size, what's happening with No Child Left Behind, the restrictions that it places on our teachers, on the way that you can teach in the classroom, teaching the kids how to take the test as opposed to encouraging critical thinking or problem solving, or going along those lines, is something that many, many people visit with us about. Most recently, we've had conversations that turn towards education in Taos, Las Vegas, and Farmington. All three of them quickly directed that way when we were just in group discussion with some of our constituents. But there's a frustration out there, and I think that's where this goes to, is it's a frustration that people all have, and it's a frustration that I share with them, to be quite honest, Julia. When you look to see whether there's economic policy, for example, cutting taxes for small businesses, small business lending packages that we're able to pay for by closing loopholes that paper mills have for producing a byproduct that they call the biofuel. When you have debate about that and your Republican colleagues are fighting with you about trying to get something passed and done that'll make a difference for people, why? These are principles and policies that oftentimes are reflected in Republican policy. And now, for the sake of causing a political fight, they're causing a political fight. So co-sponsors of two important pieces of legislation. One, the Disclose Act, which brings recognition and helps to, in some ways, overturn the decision by the Supreme Court by allowing foreign corporations and corporations to dump millions of dollars in. And the Fair Elections Now bill, which is a piece of legislation that Congresswoman Pingree principally authored, which calls for small donations and public campaign finance reform as well. So we're hoping to continue to get support for those pieces of legislation so we can continue to change the process, but also bring back the decades worth of campaign finance reform legislation that was recently overturned by the Supreme Court, which I think was a terrible decision and a bad decision. Well, as we look at the CMRR facility along the lines of what the NPR has outlined, we look to see what can be done there as well. We know that we need to, as a nation, be able to retain the necessary experts to help us move in a non-proliferation environment around the world. Where is that taking place? Los Alamos, Lawrence Livermore, and Sandia to a certain extent. How can we retain the necessary expertise so that as we're looking at other nations that say that they're not developing weapons, that they say that they're trying to develop energy, for example, but we know, for example, with Iran, that all indications and all reports are such that they're trying to develop that nuclear bomb. How do you retain that expertise if you don't have an opportunity to be able to, lower your nuclear arsenal, and also be able to identify what's happening with other countries? And so that's what we're hoping that kind of work can help take place here, as well as helping solve the waste issue. One thing that I don't think is being talked about a lot that we can depend on coming from Los Alamos is how do we solve this issue of spent fuel, of nuclear waste. That's something that the approach of the country has been buried, put in a hole. And now we've seen what's happening with Yucca, and we need to solve this issue. We need to make sure that we're doing that as well. And that's something that we can challenge our national lab to continue to look towards and make breakthroughs in, that Los Alamos could lead the way in facilities like this. I think for the most part, it's, the Republicans have done a really good job, especially our Republican colleagues, of increasing the rhetoric across the country. And they did this as early on as when we were taking on the health insurance industry, saying that there were death panels in the legislation, that they were going to be doing bad things to grandma and grandpa, are good examples of some of the rhetoric that people took notice to. As we talk about the economy, they don't want to talk about the previous 8 years. They don't want to talk about the Iraq War, the Afghanistan War that were unpaid for under President Bush. They don't want to talk about the tax breaks that went to the most wealthy that were unpaid for under President Bush. They don't want to talk about the Medicare programs that they put into place where they offered more privatization that were unpaid for. They say, well, look, we know that there are problems, but let's not talk about those. And they placed all of that blame on the current administration or the current Congress. when it was 8 years of really bad economic policy that led to those areas. As we look to see what more could have been done, I think shedding more light on the misconceptions that were being spread by our Republican colleagues. Fox News, carried their rhetoric like it was news, like it had been vetted. Even going back to the video that aired about comments that the Undersecretary, Deputy Secretary of USDA cutting her clip and cutting the vote, or cutting the clip and cutting her words. We saw the same thing with the President's recent comments where he was talking about what needs to be done for tax relief to the American people. I don't know if it was Glenn Beck or Hannity, but they cut mid-sentence a clip. And then they share that as if it's news. We need to do a better job going out there and shedding light on all of these issues. Again, when I came back home last August to visit with our constituents about the reform that we were moving forward to take on the health insurance industry, I can't tell you how many people truly believed there were death panels in this legislation. In a very meaningful way, they believed it. When in fact, we all know that there was nothing in there. That's what we could be doing better. I think all of us can do a better job of continuing to reach out to our constituents in a better way. My district, for example, it's 47,000 square miles. It's all a part of 16 counties throughout the northern half of the state of New Mexico. Over the last 20 months, we've done, if I'm not mistaken, like 27 town halls and public forums, 30 open office hours where constituents can come in and visit with me on their own, over 60 what we call congressional corners, where you'll go to a grocery store, a local donut shop or a coffee shop, and constituents can come in or a grocery store and visit with you about issues that are going on. We've held telephone town halls, trying to figure out better ways to stay in touch with your constituency. I think that's something we can always do better, and that we need to be doing better, is listening more to our constituency as well.